This movie is the most epic among all alien-based films ever made. The story is set in the year 2120, when terrifying alien creatures arrive on Earth, and the havoc they unleash will shake you to your very soul. At the beginning of the film, a spaceship named Margino was on its return journey when suddenly, a loud alarm blared inside the ship. Brian, the man in charge of security, ignored his crewmates' desperate screams, just as he always did, and calmly reported to the company that the ship was spiraling out of control. Then, with cold precision, he pulled out a welding tool from his arm and began sealing the control room door shut. The woman standing nearby hadn't even finished cursing him when a monstrous roar thundered from behind. Moments later, silence fell across the ship, but the alien didn't spare Brian. It rammed violently against the control room door, striking again and again until it began to crack. Just as the barrier was about to give way, Brian calmly completed his report and stood back. You see, he had a plan. There was a much stronger hibernation pod inside the room. The alien finally broke through, but Brian slipped into the pod without fear. No matter how savagely the alien attacked, the pod held firm. Meanwhile, the pilotless spaceship lost all control and hurtled straight toward Earth. In truth, the ship had been sent out by the Weyland Corporation on a mission to capture living organisms across the universe. The cargo Brian had reported was none other than these deadly creatures. The ship wasn't just carrying face-hugging parasites. It was filled with many other horrifying, unknown life forms. But the question was, why was Weyland doing this? At that time, Weyland wasn't yet the almighty interstellar empire it would one day become. On Earth, it shared power with 4 other corporations. During this age of technological empires, there were more than just humans. There were biohumans, enhanced with mechanical strength, and artificially created hybrids. The race for dominance in the galaxy depended on which technology would ultimately prevail. After a long struggle, it wasn't Weyland who made the first breakthrough, but the Prodigy Corporation, which was experimenting on hybrid humans. The company's leader, Prodigy, appeared to be nothing more than a teenage boy. Their first successful subject was a young girl named Wendy, who had been suffering from an incurable disease. She became the first hybrid. Soon after, 5 more hybrid children were created in the secretive Dream Island laboratory. But Wendy remained the most special among them all. She had an older brother, Martin, a medic in the army. Because of strict secrecy agreements, Martin had no idea that Wendy had been turned into a hybrid. The only way Wendy could see him was through hidden cameras. One day, she noticed that Martin was requesting to resign from the military. He never liked life in the army, but robotic officers refused to release him because of his contract. During a training exercise, Martin suddenly heard a terrifying explosion from the skies above. The spaceship carrying the deadly alien creatures had finally completed its long journey and crashed straight into Earth. A massive cloud of black smoke rose over the city, and the military rushed immediately toward Ground Zero. Martin, who had stubbornly refused to resign until now, was finally forced to join the rescue mission. The army quickly began dispersing the crowd, and then the Alliance started a detailed inspection of the crashed spacecraft. At that very moment, the violent impact jolted Brian awake. When he realized the ship had gone down inside Prodigy Corporation's territory, he immediately relayed the information to Weyland. Unbeknownst to him, Wendy, who had been secretly keeping an eye on her brother, witnessed it all. Out of concern for her family, she rushed straight to Prodigy and begged to be sent to the crash site. Prodigy, eager to test the results of its own experiments, quickly decided to deploy 6 hybrid soldiers under a colonel's command on a rescue mission. What they didn't know was that a deadly threat had already awakened inside the ship. Meanwhile, 2 soldiers were scouting the wreck from within. Soon they stumbled upon lifeless bodies sprawled on the floor. But while they were examining the scene, they failed to notice a horrific insect slithering down a silken thread and landing on their backs. It crawled inside through the collar of one uniform. Their attention was drawn to other strange creatures trapped inside cargo crates, so they had no idea that something was already changing within their own bodies. But someone else had no intention of letting them walk out alive. Brian suddenly appeared from behind, gun in hand. Forced to surrender, the soldiers dropped their weapons, and Brian tied them up. Moments later, the parasite crawled back out. Brian hadn't restrained them to protect them. His only aim was to make sure no specimen escaped the wreck. If that happened, the cost of deep space exploration would be wasted, and the entire mission deemed a failure. Human lives meant nothing to him. The insect clung to one soldier's neck. His screams quickly died out as the creature's body swelled grotesquely. His bound companion could only writhe helplessly. A heartbeat later, the monster lunged at him too. On the other side, Martin's squad had yet to face any danger, but they, too, stumbled upon something unsettling. Inside a sleep pod lay a corpse with a massive hole torn through its chest, as if something had ripped its way out. Blood trails on the floor put the team instantly on edge, and they followed the tracks cautiously. They had no idea that a shadow was stalking them from the darkness. Soon they crawled through a fractured opening and emerged outside the ship, finding themselves inside a 100-story building where the wreck had crashed. Nervously, they pushed open the stairwell door, but nothing unusual seemed to be there. Only a steady stream stream of falling dust hinted that the building could collapse at any moment. After a quick discussion, the team decided to move downward, both to continue their search and to check whether the building's occupants had been evacuated. But the structure was in terrible shape, and before long their path was completely blocked. Assessing the situation, the captain leapt down first. Another soldier immediately followed. Martin was just about to jump when sticky fluid dripped onto his shoulder from above. He realized instantly the thing was hiding in the breach. Drawing his weapon, he fired, but the moment his eyes locked on the grotesque alien, Martin didn't hesitate for even a second. He jumped. The leap was clumsy and rushed, with the enemy right on his heels. Instead of landing near his comrades, he crashed onto the floor below. But Martin had no time to think. The alien was closing in fast. Summoning every ounce of strength, he sprinted. Just as the creature lunged at him, he dove into an elevator and narrowly escaped. Prodigy's team of hybrid humans entered the building. Colonel Jin sent Wendy and Thomas inside, while he led the rest toward the spaceship to investigate. The deeper Wendy went, the more uneasy she felt. Meanwhile, Wayland contacted Prodigy, offering to cover all the damage caused to the building in exchange for getting her spaceship back. But Prodigy flatly refused. Wayland's unusually polite and eager attitude made it clear that whatever was inside that ship was extremely important. This only fueled Prodigy's scientific curiosity. He decided that no matter what, he had to uncover Wayland's secret. Immediately, he began reviewing the surveillance footage. By then, the rescue team had already entered the ship. Soon, they stumbled upon a massive structure resembling a flower. Strange noises were coming from its unopened buds. The sight of the alien life form thrilled Prodigy. Colonel Jin ordered the soldiers to find a container large enough to secure it. But as they moved forward, they discovered the corpses of 2 soldiers already bound and left behind. Suddenly, under the flashlight's beam, a grotesque, bloated monster peeled itself off their bodies and scurried away. Even though the hybrid soldiers had bodies far stronger than normal humans, mentally, they were still just children. Terrified, they kept stumbling backward. That's when they heard movement from the other side. They saw a cat scratching frantically at the floor, but when it turned, half its body was already decayed, and its eyes had grown abnormally large. In the next instant, a horrifying creature burst out from inside it. The eye was actually the head of an octopus-like monster. Before the soldiers could react, the octopus eye scaled the walls at lightning speed and lunged at them. Luckily, Annie reacted in time. She blocked it with her bare hands and hurled it across the room. Meanwhile, Martin, frightened and shaken, finally encountered a soldier after stepping out of the elevator. He frantically explained everything he had seen, but before they could discuss further, noises started coming from the next room. Inside, a group of drunk partiers were making such a ruckus that they hadn't noticed any of the chaos outside. Even after hearing warnings, the intoxicated landlord dismissed them and shut the door. Panicked, Martin kept banging on it. Suddenly, that same terrifying shadow appeared again. The alien tore the soldier apart in front of Martin's eyes. Enraged, the landlord opened the door, only to witness the gruesome scene himself. The monster hurled a corpse straight into Martin, knocking him to the ground. By sheer luck, Martin wasn't its target this time. Instead, the alien stormed into the apartment, ripping into the screaming partygoers. Within moments, the blood-soaked room fell silent. Seeing this, Martin grabbed a gun from the floor. Holding a weapon finally gave him some courage. He moved forward cautiously, only for the alien to pounce on him, slamming him to the ground. At that critical moment, Brian, the man assigned to protect the ship's cargo, arrived. He electroshocked the alien, knocking it unconscious and dragging it away. Before Martin could even say thank you, Brian turned the stun gun on him as well. Many death lines, like deadly snares, shot out and coiled tightly around the alien. Then it was hoisted up and carried away by Brian. During all this, he didn't spare so much as a glance at Martin, who was lying unconscious on the ground. Just as Brian was about to leave, a squad of armed soldiers arrived. Brian quickly explained that the bag he was carrying only had supplies in it. But the very next moment, the bag began to shake on its own. Suspicious, the soldiers instantly raised their guns. Brian had no way out. He just stood there silently. But in the very next second, the entire unit was wiped out. The alien was standing right behind Brian. Quietly, Brian pulled out his knife, ready to risk his life. But before the alien could strike, other soldiers, drawn by the noise, arrived, unintentionally saving him. Meanwhile, when Wendy and Thomas reached the scene, the floor was littered with corpses. Martin, still unconscious, had narrowly survived yet again. At last, Wendy managed to find her brother. Elsewhere, Colonel had heard the commotion and rushed back to his team. Instead of opening the container lid directly, he yanked out the laboratory's computer connector and linked it to his own hand interface. That's when the truth was revealed. He himself was a mythical human. That was the real reason he had been chosen to lead these troubled children. But then, a strange, flower-like creature suddenly bloomed, its tongue snapping outward. A normal human would have run instantly, but Tom, being half-human, stood firm under orders, glaring at it without moving. Finally, at his comrade's call, he left the spot. In the meantime, the colonel had discovered another, even more important location. He immediately sent one of his men there there and also summoned Wendy and her team for backup. On the way, Wendy told Martin the truth, and at last, the brother and sister were reunited in the midst of all this chaos. Soon, everyone arrived at the site, where countless alien eggs lay clustered. Sensing danger, an alien darted toward them. Wendy once again felt that same ominous chill, but the real threat wasn't the eggs. In the next instant, an alien appeared suddenly and lunged straight at Martin. Terrified, Wendy shouted for Thomas to keep his eyes on the eggs while she ran to save her brother. What dangers await her next, no one knows. And what about Thomas, left behind to guard the eggs? Could disaster strike him as well? To find out, we move on to episode 3. The story picks up right where the last part ended. After her brother was taken, Wendy immediately chased after him and quickly reached the crash site of the alien ship. All around, the roars of aliens echoed in the night. Gripping her sword tightly, she called out Martin's name with all her strength. Suddenly, Martin's screams came from inside a container. Without a second thought, Wendy leapt inside. There, she saw Martin plastered to the wall by the alien's slimy saliva. Clearly, it was a trap set for prey. But Wendy, desperate to save her brother, refused to back down. At that very moment, the alien slammed the door shut. Now it was up to Wendy alone to protect him. The alien had sensed the threat as well. This time it didn't attack from the front. Instead, it climbed onto the ceiling of the container, preparing to strike from above. Hearing its slow, creeping footsteps getting closer, Wendy decided she couldn't wait any longer. Wendy instantly drove the sword into the alien's body. Green blood poured out through the cracks, and the acid within it immediately began to melt the iron. Martin shoved his sister out of the way just in time and quickly tore off his blood-soaked clothes. But in the very next moment, the crate flipped over. Wendy tumbled straight out through the massive corroded gap. Seeing this, Martin grabbed an iron hook without caring about the danger and ran after her, only to be caught by an alien lying in wait. Within moments, Martin was slammed back to the ground. As the creature thrust its terrifying jaws forward, Wendy pierced it with the iron hook. The alien shrieked in agony, thrashing wildly. But no matter how hard it struggled, it couldn't escape Wendy's pull. Behind them stood a warehouse. If its door could be shut, the monster would be trapped inside. Wendy dragged the alien into the warehouse and hurled it in. Martin immediately slammed the button, but at the very last second, the alien snapped its jaws shut and, with its tail, yanked Wendy inside with it. A panicked Martin rushed to open the door again, only to be stunned at the sight before him. The alien's decapitated body lay on the floor. He had never imagined that in this deadly battle, the final victory would belong to Wendy. Yet right then, he noticed something was wrong. Fluid was leaking heavily from her head, brain fluid. As Martin rushed to her side, he suddenly coughed up blood himself and collapsed, clutching his chest right next to Wendy. Meanwhile, guarding the eggs, Thomas suddenly heard a noise nearby. Alarmed, he drew his knife, only to relax a moment later when his friend Tom casually stepped out. Relieved, Thomas laughed and joked with him. But then Brian appeared, armed with a gun. After questioning them, he realized the two were behaving like children. He immediately understood they were hybrid humans. Direct force might not work on them, but words could. Sure enough, they were frightened by Brian's threats and obediently surrendered their mental data to him. That's when the truth came out. Brian was a biomechanical human. In fact, he was the result of an incomplete experiment. Technology at the time hadn't fully advanced. His biomech body was forced to follow commands. But once he saw that new advancements could create both powerful bodies and independent thought, his spirit completely broke. Just then, the Colonel arrived casually. His cold gaze filled the air with tension. Even the insect eggs seemed to respond, beginning to stir. Seeing the situation spiral out of control, Brian decided to escape and barely slipped away from death. This clash gave Prodigy Corporation a temporary advantage. They gathered all the cargo from the ship and transported it to Dream Island for research. Wendy's repair process was also initiated right away. Prodigy asked her just a few questions and then left, their interest already shifting elsewhere. But what Prodigy had no idea about was just how dangerous the insect egg they had released truly was. Luckily, the Colonel had linked into the ship's computer and discovered the creature's methods of attack. The Colonel came to a chilling conclusion. The aliens could only survive and grow inside human bodies. The moment Prodigy heard this, he instantly changed his strategy. Meanwhile, Brian, who had escaped from the spaceship, sent a report back to the company. But 65 years had already passed since the beginning of his mission. In that time, ownership of Beeland had changed hands. Now the founder's granddaughter was running the corporation. Brian begged her for one more chance to retrieve the cargo from the spacecraft. She agreed, and Brian threw himself back into his work. Not long after, Thomas was watching TV when he suddenly heard a voice, though he was alone in the room. It was Brian, who had hacked into the network to contact him. Brian tried to apologize for everything that had happened before, and with complete sincerity, told Thomas he wanted to be his friend. At the same time, Winnie finally regained consciousness. But the moment she sat up, she felt an overwhelming sense of danger. That shouldn't have been possible, not here on Dream Island, where security was tighter than anywhere else. What she didn't know was that, at that very moment, the Colonel and his team were dissecting an alien egg. Inside, behind a thin membrane, a facehugger thrashed violently. As soon as Wendy entered the lab, she collapsed. collapse, unconscious. Meanwhile, the Colonel finally extracted an alien embryo. At that same time, Martin was undergoing surgery. The doctors removed his intestines, then placed the alien embryo beside him. The instant it was brought close, the creature spun twice, then plunged inside and began to grow. The surge of danger was so intense it sent Wendy's unconscious body into violent convulsions. To watch the next episode, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. As soon as this video hits 500 likes, the second part will be released. It seemed Prodigy had already begun walking down the path of death.